Amen. A little more snazzy the second hour. Introduction. During our rehearsal dinner, Kristen and I, Stalls was there and he decided to give a toast, as is Stalls's, he wanted to say a few words. And this was his comment, as he said, Kristen, I want you to know that at your 5th wedding anniversary, you will have not lived with Kenny as long as I have. And I can say 7 years into marriage, I would way rather live with Kristen. So what if we pass the Bible cart, slip up your hands, grab a Bible if you don't have one. If you do have one, you can turn to Luke 19. As a Grace Global worker, I just want to say thank you. There's, I think, 32 of us individuals that are in some ways connected to Grace in a long-term relationship as global workers and spread out all over the world. And we're not here often. And so on their behalf, thank you. And it's been really fun for Kristen and I in this season to just be back for a little bit. We've been in town for, 4 or 5 months or so. And it's been so fun to reconnect with former students that were in high school ministry when I was a high school pastor, and then to see many of you are their parents and to hear stories of what they're up to. It's just really great. There's people who have come on Epic, and we've gotten to know through that, and it's just such a delight to be here. And the kids ministry is awesome. We love it. It's so great. We actually, whenever we have church in Jerusalem, it's usually just a small group of us, and the kids are just in the other room, and we hope they're not, killing each other. And so that they're down here and being loved and cared for and taught about Jesus is absolutely amazing. We're going to miss you when we're gone. The other day I was in Starbucks about, not the other day, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and my Palestinian friend comes in. We've gotten to know each other because, one day I heard this guy speaking in Arabic on the phone, and I was like, hey, Inta min Wayne. What? That means, where are you from? And he's like, you speak Arabic? I was like, yeah, I speak Arabic. And so we started talking, becoming friends, and anyway, he comes in every few weeks, and we, chat and talk about politics and religion and his car business and different things. And I just love seeing him. And I was so excited when he came in the other day because he said, I wanted to tell him, I'm moving back. The visa stuff is going to work out. It's going to be great. And I'm moving back. And he got so excited. He's like, oh my gosh, my family, they're in Ramallah. You've got to go see them. This is going to be amazing. Everyone's going to get together. It's going to be perfect. You and your family and all this kind of stuff. And you must come. You cannot say no. I'm like, whoa. And this is classic, by the way, Palestinian invitation, right? It's just all bravado. And it's got to get some obligation in there too. So this is my friend. And I said, yeah, I'd love that. Actually, I'd really love that. And then he goes, you know what else? I'm moving back too. I was like, really? This is cool. We've got this friendship going on at Starbucks in Snellville, and man, we're going to be friends over there. It's awesome. And then I said, I was just curious. I was like, why are you moving back? And he said, well, honestly, America, it's killing me. The capitalism, the work, everyone's competing all the time. Money, 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 work, work. No one ever rests. No one says enough. And now our kids are getting shot for going to school. I'm moving to Ramallah because I want to live in peace. Yes. Crazy, right? And aside from making me laugh and love this guy more, I thought his comment was pretty beautiful, even profound maybe, but it points to something that we all feel pretty deeply these days, right? Not much peace. The discourse in the country is tense, and many of us feel weak or impotent to actually make a difference, to make a change, to step into that God-given desire we all feel for peace. So today, we're going to talk about being peacemakers. We're going to talk about the working and the weeping of making peace? And this is the question I want you to have in mind the whole time we're having this conversation, is what are these issues at the community level, at the national level, that really need peace? What are those things on the personal level? Maybe you've got a marriage, not much peace going on in it. Maybe you've got a coworker or a boss or a son where there desperately needs to be some peacemaking. Or one final category you might be in is maybe you've been asked to step into a situation where there needs to be peace. What do you do? So, just a warning from the outset, this sermon is not about quiet streams. It's not about inner tranquility, sitting by peaceful. None of that. This is about work. This is about weeping, because peacemaking is challenging. It's messy, it's controversial. Feelings start to swell up, Peacemaking is actually rarely peaceful, but it's absolutely essential. And so today, as we're looking at Jesus' ministry, I just want to note from the outset that he is our master and our model for peacemaking. And this sermon, by the way, I think ties in very nicely to where we as a body have been since the new year. Stalls, not to confuse those two, Stalls started this series on prayer, right? And if you recall, he had this phrase that he picked up somewhere, that prayer is not preparation for the work, prayer is the work, right? A lot of people have latched onto that. That comment, that came when he was in Israel, Palestine on an epic trip, speaking to one of my dear friends, actually a mentor of mine. And so we are very much tied into this idea that prayer is the work. And then we have this next series of fasting, right? And it's all about doing that inner work, that refinement, that turning to God. But this sermon is about what to expect as you press into that focus of peacemaking. Just one quick story. Kristen and I were in Midtown, spent a year there, our first year of marriage. And you all know this actually by now, is that no one ever falls in love on the same day, right? You got the guy and the girl. It never happens on the same day. And it's always helpful to realize that. Hopefully before, it's good to get that clear. But also, God doesn't always speak to us on the same day about calling and vocation and stuff. So we were fasting and praying while we were in Midtown, and God really spoke to us about living our lives in Jerusalem. And just a couple things quickly about that, so you can know and relate to this, is that everyone knows Jeremiah 29:11, right? Pretty common verse, right? For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. What you need to realize is that Jeremiah is speaking to exiles. And God is saying he has a plan for them. But here's the question. What are they supposed to do? Right? I mean, it's nice, right? Oh, God has a plan for me. Okay, what do I do? Right? If we look back a little bit, earlier in the chapter of Jeremiah, I'm in verse 7. You don't have to turn there or anything. But Jeremiah also says this. He says, also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. I think this is a profound spiritual lesson for us as we relate to these different cities and arenas of our life, is that wherever we live, whether it's Jerusalem, Lilburn, downtown Atlanta, Parkview District, whatever, we can be peacemakers. And that's a lot of what we did when we went to Jerusalem, is we wanted to figure out, how can we help? Nothing too big or profound or special, but God has given us a burden for this. So just to kind of orient you a little bit on who we are, I've got a few pictures. So here we are. This is Kristen and I outside of Buddy's Midtown house, Buddy and Jody's. It's really Jody's house. And these are the bags we took, and that's it. Next slide. Shortly after we arrived, this was our apartment that we found. Could tell you a cool God story about that, but we'll save that for another time. And Kristen would want you to know that this is not what it always looked like. This was the first day. We bought that sofa on the side of the road. Next slide. That apartment is in a community that has been cut off from Jerusalem by that wall. 2006 is when Israel put it up and devastated the community. It's part of the conflict, and we wanted to live with the people who had been cut off by the wall. Next slide. Here's me and Buddy. We're in Caesarea Philippi, up in the north of Israel. That was a fun time. I'll come back to that scene in Caesarea Philippi in a minute. Let's go to the next one. Oh, here's a cute one. This is Kristen in the middle, a few of her girlfriends. After Lincoln's birth, they had a baby shower for her. And, it's very cute. Lincoln was born in Bethlehem, right? He had in a Christian hospital by a Muslim doctor. 8 days later, he was circumcised by a Jewish rabbi. So he's covered. We got it. And another funny thing, you asked Lincoln, who's really special that was born in Jerusalem? He's like, me! Yes, perfect. I mean, Jesus too, of course. Next slide. There he is. Yeah. Okay, one more. And this is we also at one point lived in an apartment, not the same one behind the wall, but a different one on the backside of the Mount of Olives. And literally just 50 meters away from where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, right? John chapter 11. Unfortunately, that site is on the other side of the wall. Very sad. And just up the hill is where Jesus ordered the donkey, right, for Palm Sunday. And it's very funny because now there's this pizza joint there. And so I always say that, Jesus ordered a donkey and I order pizza from the same place. That was funny. And then you go up over the crest of the hill and you see that. And so I want to look at Luke 19:41. It's a beautiful scene here. As that's Jesus, 19:41 and 42. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, now it is hidden from your eyes. We show this picture here. This is a picture of a church, inside of the church that they built on this site to commemorate. They don't know exactly where this happened, but this is called Dominus Flevit, which is Latin for the Lord wept. And this is what many tourists see. But when I'm there, I always think of my friend Sammy. And Sammy's a dear friend, Muslim guy, mid-20s. Dad has a shop in the old city, great family, he's God-fearing. And one day we were together and just chatting, we've chatted many times, and this one day he pulled out his phone and he said, look at this. And he shows me the phone, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, well that's just a picture of the old city. I mean, looking over the Mount of Olives, okay, what's the deal? And he said, but how does it make you feel? I said, well, how does it make you feel? Help me, And he said, it makes me weep. And he said, I was driving my scooter up the hill this morning, and I just stopped, and I just couldn't stop weeping over the city. So I took a picture to remember. And I said to him, Sammy, do you know who you sound like? He's like, no. I said, you sound like Jesus. He's like, what? Yeah, so we turned to Luke 19. I read it. He's like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's how I feel. And I guess we have to ask the question, why would Jesus weep? And we could answer this question in many ways. We could talk about the centrality of Jerusalem and Judaism. We could talk about the history of the temples in Jerusalem. We could even go back to Abraham and Isaac, right? We could talk about how Jesus understood his vocation in relationship to first century Judaism, how he used symbols and prophetic acts and all of that stuff. I don't have time for all of that today. I wish I did. Ask Stalls to teach you this stuff. It's very important. But I will point you to a book called The Challenge of Jesus by N.T. Wright. It's called Rediscovering Who Jesus Was and Is. I'll give you a quote from it in a little bit, but I want to just do a quick book plug on that, because all of that backstory that can help you understand the symbolism and the power and what Jesus is doing there, this book will help guide you as you read the Gospels too. But I want to answer the question through Luke's gospel, okay? If you turn on your handout, you'll see this thing. It says, the centrality of Jesus' journey to Jerusalem in Luke. And let me just begin by saying, if we want to understand Luke's account, we need to kind of imagine the gospel in three sections. We've got section 1 right here, which is Jesus' birth and the beginning of the ministry in Galilee. And then we've got section 2, which is the journey to Jerusalem. And then we have section 3, which is the Passion Week. And so what we're going to do is we're going to camp out right here in the middle. So if you would turn back to Luke 9:51. Now, I'm not going to go through every one of these on your handout, but I'm going to just kind of highlight a few of them. But I do want to start at Luke 9:51. As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Now, in some ways, this is a fairly mundane verse. You're like, okay, great. He began his journey. No big deal. But I want to point out that what Luke is telling us at first is that this is very late in Jesus' ministry. This is his final journey. So you have a third of the Gospel of Luke dedicated to this just last couple weeks moving into the city. So he's already been performing miracles. He's already been teaching. He's already been gathering disciples. He's already been healing. He's already got the religious authorities hacked off at him. This is where he is. If you turn back just a few verses to verse 18, right, 9:18 to 20, this is this famous passage where Jesus asks Peter, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are God's Messiah, the Christ." And this is a massive moment in the ministry of Jesus. This is where Buddy and I were standing, by the way, in Caesarea Philippi. Luke doesn't say exactly where it was, but Matthew does. And then we have the next few verses in 21 and forward. This is where Jesus first predicts his death. In 23, we have this very profound passage that says, "Then he said to them all, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it.'" It's very significant that this teaching is coming right on the hills of the Jerusalem journey. Now, flip over a couple chapters to 13. (13:31). At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, "Leave this place and go elsewhere. Herod wants to kill you." Now, I find this verse rather hysterical, because since when are the Pharisees concerned about Jesus' safety? Right? Oh, Herod wants to kill you. You need to go. No, they want to kill him. Right? We see religious and political authorities getting pretty close to each other. And let's talk about Herod for a second, right? He's the tetrarch of Galilee. He's a Roman politician, and also he's the murderer of Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist. He has political power, and he has no problem using violence. This is a violent man. And this is Jesus' reply, verse 32. Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day, I will reach my goal. Jesus' response to a death threat by a politician is to tell him off. Tell off his cronies. I've got work to do. This is happening. All of a sudden, that docile picture we have of Jesus, he's submissive and quaint, we hold our, that image is starting to shift, right? It takes courage to make peace. That's your second blank in your handout. Peacemaking takes courage. I'll get to the first one. So, there's this movie. We actually love it. It's called We Bought a Zoo, right? You've seen this, Matt Damon. And there's this time when his son, he's got this little love interest thing, and the son doesn't know what he should do and this kind of thing. And he has this phrase, sometimes all it takes is just 20 seconds of insane courage. If you're going to be a peacemaker, it takes courage. And sometimes just 20 seconds of it, by the way. I remember years ago, we were in Midtown, Kristen and I, and we were in Target one evening. And we were walking, doing our shopping. This is before kids, so it's fairly late in the evening. And there was this Muslim couple, And Kristen saw us, I want to go talk to him. And Kenny, you go talk to him, right? She decides that since she wants to talk to him, that I need to talk to him. So I was like, well, you go talk to him. And so she said, okay, I'm going to do it. And so she walks up to this woman, Assalamu alaikum, and she said, oh, do you speak Arabic? I was like, well, no, I don't speak Arabic either. Well, why don't we just speak in English? Okay. And so anyways, they became friends. And it just, that 20 seconds of crazy courage, right? And now what's so funny, and this is an important point with peacemaking, is courage builds courage. Almost every time Kristen comes home from the store now, she has another new friend. I'm serious. She's like, oh, I got to go hang out with this girl now. I got to do this. It's like not even a deal anymore. And when you're going to step into these situations where peacemaking is essential, go for it. 20 seconds, that's all it takes, at least at the beginning. But what about when it's not your conflict? This is an interesting one. You've been put in a situation where you could be a peacemaker for somebody else. You've got to share your courage, right? Maybe another way you could say it is you got to share your faith, because these people who are in conflict, they can't see it. They can't get out of it. You have to share your faith with them that there can be reconciliation. I will never forget a story. Early in our days in Jerusalem, I was studying at the Hebrew University and taking some Arabic courses. And I had this professor, and she was about this tall, and she was a firecracker. You know these? Just little woman, Jewish, She learned Arabic when she was in the IDF, just way back in the day, and she got to know Palestinians and was enjoying them and decided to learn Arabic, and she became an Arabic teacher. And so one day she pulls me aside and she says, Kenny, how are you getting so good at Arabic? What are you doing? I've been teaching for 70 years, I've never seen anyone progress so fast. I said, well, my secret is we also have this private tutor, my wife and I, and we study about 20 hours a week outside of your class, and then we do homework, and then we go out and have conversations like we're giving our lives to this thing. This is why we're progressing. And she said, okay, that's great. I want to meet your teacher. And I said, oh, well, that's funny. Okay, why not? I don't know. So a few days later, we're with this Palestinian girl, very nice, kind. She's got a great laugh, by the way. Conservative Palestinian Muslim woman. And I told her, hey, my professor at Hebrew University wants to meet you. And she's like, what? They wouldn't even let me pass security there. And then I was like, uh-oh, I know what that means. She just told me something's impossible. We've got to have a little courage. It's time. There's an opportunity for something here. So we arranged the whole thing. I said, no, you can do it. We'll get it. We'll make it happen. They'll let you through. Don't worry. And so we arranged this meeting. We're out in front of the little front gate for Hebrew University. And we walk up to the security. I will confess, I'm a little, anxious, hands in my pockets, like, oh, I hope this goes well. We get there, and they deny her. They said, no, you can't come in. You don't belong here. You don't have an ID. You don't have oh, well, we have a meeting with a professor. It doesn't matter. And I feel terrible, right? I'm like, shoot, this girl has trusted me. She's like being courageous with me. I don't know what to do. So I call this professor in campus and say, hey, they wouldn't let us in. Sorry, we got to cancel and all of that. And, again, she's this tall, fiery. She's like, no, I'm not having it. Stay there. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, stay here. And a few minutes later, this car flies up, outside, rolls down the window, get in the car. We're like, okay, yes, ma'am. And she's like, those security guards don't know anything. Don't listen to them. They are just, This is why you love her, right? And so we go around the back professor entrance to the university. They don't even they just wave us by, come on in, welcome. And we sit and we have coffee and we're talking about, learning Arabic, the old city, all these kind of things. And it was a great meeting. At the end of the meeting, we're walking back out. I'm just with this Palestinian girl now. The professor has stayed in her office. And I'm just kind of floored by, man, here I am, this Christian, having a conversation with this conservative Muslim woman and this Jewish woman all at the same time. And it's just beautiful. And I'm like, this is great. And then this Palestinian girl said, you know what? I'm 32 years old. I've never talked to a Jew. I've never talked to one. Crazy. And by the way, this professor said, if I ever hear of an opportunity to teach Arabic, can I contact you? And the Palestinian said, yeah, of course. A few months later, got her a job, which was really sweet. And sometimes you've got to have courage. You've got to share that with people who are in a conflicted situation. Let's look at chapter 13, verse 33. In any case, this is Jesus speaking, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Right? This is foreshadowing to Palm Sunday. But I want to point out something here very important. Jesus is a prophet. Okay, we're comfortable with him being the Messiah. He's our Savior. Jesus is a prophet, okay? It's not just he's a prophet in Islam. He is a prophet in Christianity, right? Again, I'll plug this book. This will work out the details for you. And prophets speak God's truth to God's people. They often use prophetic acts, right? You have Ezekiel lies on his side for 390 days. Jeremiah smashes clay jars. There's all kinds of things we could talk about with the prophets. But what happens to the prophets? They get killed. They get killed. It's because people don't want to repent, right? Ooh, that's a tough message. Oh, that cuts. They don't want that. But then you might ask, well, how are prophets peacemakers? And I'll just give it to you like this. They remind people that by living according to God's intentions, they can live in and experience peace. When people, both individually and corporately, are loving God and neighbor, they can and will live in peace. It's a beautiful vision. It's very simple, but a word of caution. When that peace, when that status quo is built on oppression, abuse, injustice, violence, being a peacemaker means speaking the truth to ungodly power. Sometimes being a peacemaker actually means disturbing the peace. Look at Jesus. He was offering some very strong critique. So your first line in your handout, peacemaking takes both critique and compassion. I'll just tell them to you both now, and we're going to talk about critique for a second. Now, critique's an interesting one, right? I mean, it's not so like, oh, we don't talk about that at church. But before you march out of here ready to, stick it to the system, just a word of caution. Anger always feels self-justified, right? I mean, have you ever been angry? You're not thinking about whether you're right or wrong. You're just angry. You're right. You can't be wrong because, you're angry. That's just how anger as an emotion works. And I remember just kind of one silly example. Kristen and I had some sort of argument, and a little while later, she brought me a cup of coffee, right? Here's what I was like, what's her angle? What's her motive? What's she doing? What's she scheming here? I'm angry, right? A few days later, resolution. It's like, hey, why'd you bring me that coffee, by the way? Oh, I was just trying to be kind to you. Oh, yeah. Activism kindled on the flame of anger burns out quick. If this burden you feel is just because you've been riled up by some Facebook post or whatever, you haven't quite got it yet. This is why, by the way, we need the spiritual disciplines. We need the prayer. We need the fasting. It's essential. We can even in those spiritual disciplines discover how we ourselves are the obstacle of peace, right? You have the critique, but you also have the compassion. This is essential, right? Look at this image that Jesus uses. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. This is a beautiful image, right? Take a barnyard, burn it to the ground. You have hens in it. You find the mama hen fried. Under her wings, the little chicks will be there alive. Jesus has a message of critique, but also one of compassion. Whatever your issue is, you have to have both. And by the way, I mean, don't you know that critique without compassion, it makes you want to vomit, right? Have you ever been rebuked by someone that didn't care about you? It's nasty, it's bitter, right? It's that 1 Corinthians 13. It's the the spiritual gifts without love. It's just a resounding gong. It doesn't work. Your authority to speak critically on an issue is tied to your level of personal engagement. We don't need people to shout from the sidelines. Get in there, get your hands dirty. But how and when and where you communicate your critique is vital, okay? I'm not just talking about Facebook slacktivism, right? Oh, I posted something. I'm an activist. I like that. That's not what I'm talking about. We have to think critically about where we place our critique. Jesus was a master of this, by the way. You're not alone. Jesus has taught you how to do this. Look at Luke 15, right? Flip over just another page or two. Everyone knows the story of the prodigal son. It's a gorgeous story. It's deeply rooted in our tradition. We love telling this story. It's so important. But I want you to see something here. I want you to look in verse 1, 15:1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered. Okay, this man welcomes sinners and eat with him. There's two groups of people here. There's sinners, tax collectors, bad people, and there's the self-righteous, pious Pharisees, okay? And I'm just going to read you a little quote from this to help you with that. Among the dozens of things people regularly and often rightly say about this parable, one thing is missed by virtually everybody, though I submit to you that it would be blindingly obvious to most first century Jewish listeners. The parable was not a general illustration of the timeless truth of God's forgiveness for the sinner, though of course it can be translated into that. It was a sharp-edged, context-specific message about what was happening in Jesus' ministry. To the tax collectors and the sinners, the story of the son coming home and being welcomed by a loving father is so beautiful and compassionate. But think about this story over here of the older brother. He's hacked off that the younger brother came home. He doesn't know what it's like to live in God's blessing, even though he's been home the whole time. Jesus is offering a scathing critique to these Pharisees. He's very clever about it, too. And when you're peacemaking, pushback is normal. Let's just say that, right? You got this situation you're thinking about, maybe that kind of tape's been playing in your head the whole time about what your situation or circumstance is. Peacemaking has pushback. Pushback is normal, right? Just because you've read your book, Critical Conversations, and you're ready to go talk to this person, that doesn't mean this person's going to receive it. And sometimes courage isn't this 20 seconds of insane courage. Sometimes courage is hard-nosed determination. I'm not giving up. I'm not letting down. I'm not backing out of this. This is our third point, that peacemaking is costly. I had dinner with a mentor. There was another scholar there. And this mentor and this friend has worked on Jerusalem his whole career, 30 years. He's written all the books, just stacks of them. All the articles, he's drawn up all the plans for conflict resolution. Oh, if it gets solved, what can we do with this and this and this geographical? It's crazy. Whole life, his whole career has been dedicated to this. He knows all the key players politically, all of that. And so we're at this dinner, and the other person asked him, has your work made a difference? I was like, whoa, that's a scary question to face. Your whole career, has it made a difference? And this is what he said. He said, I think I've helped things from getting worse. I think I've kept it from getting worse. Now, you could say that, that's depressing. And in a way it is. But in another way, I think it's humble and life-giving. Because some things, they're worth doing even if you're not going to succeed. It is worth pursuing peace even if you fail at doing it. Even if you fail at achieving it, right? And I'm not just talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm talking about your marriage. I'm talking about your boss. I'm talking about your son. I'm talking about your daughter. I'm talking about our community. Peace is so important, right? Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. For us to step into that identity as his children. Peacemakers should be the primary thing we are known by. And we got to keep going. It's costly, right? Eugene Peterson wrote a book called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. No, I've never read it. But that title, ooh. I saw this title. By the way, I'm being totally serious. I never read the book. Sometimes you don't have to read the book, you know? Sometimes the title is just enough. That title inspired me so deeply. We need a long obedience in the same direction. I feel like sometimes with our activism, we get all excited about something for a week or month. Oh, someone posted something on Facebook. Oh, here's the next thing. Oh, we're just like, what are we doing? We need a long obedience in the same direction. It doesn't happen overnight. Jesus is our model for this. Look back at Luke 19. This is where we began. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it's hidden from your eyes. Why is Jesus weeping? He's weeping because he can see what's ahead. He's weeping because he sees the cost of peacemaking. He's weeping because he's pressing in. So what scene are you overlooking? What vista is on the horizon? What conflict, what turmoil, what personal thing, what national thing even is on the horizon that you're looking at, that you are ready to press in and weep and do the work of peace? I want to end just with one story that for me just captures so much of what I hope you're getting here. Is I've got a friend, he's from Jerusalem, Palestinian guy, Muslim guy, has a restaurant on the Jewish side. 15 years, been there. He's an excellent cook, by the way. If any of you ever come to visit, we'll have some hummus and we'll do this stuff. We'll enjoy that. And he talks about, I've served Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres and all this. And if you know Israeli politics, you know that these are prime ministers, presidents, that sort of thing. I mean, he's good. One day, he shows up to his restaurant. Or let me pause, actually. There's one more character you need. Is over this 15 years, he had gotten to be friends with a few nuns that had a monastery just close by. And they would come and eat his food as well. And he had known them, and sometimes he would go down to the monastery on a relaxing day or whatever. Okay, so one day, he shows up to his restaurant early in the morning. Before his eyes, Israeli bulldozers are plowing his restaurant to the ground. He falls to his knees. He's watching his life crumble before his eyes. Can you imagine this? And as he's sitting there on his knees, he feels this feeling on his head. And it's one of these nuns. This nun has come and placed her hand on his head, and she's weeping. And he said, I'll never forget the first time he told the story. He said, I felt her tears hit my head and my shoulder, and she wept with me. And she said, come, you can't stay here. You have to come away. She took him to the monastery. and gave him some coffee. And anyways, he eventually got sorted out in the next few days. He said, "No, for 2 or 3 days, I'm just drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. I don't know what to do because everything is ruined." And then he said the craziest thing happened. I had this dream. I was outside of that monastery, and the doors were huge and it was beautiful. And I was approaching it, and I had this real sense of presence. And these doors opened, and I looked up and to the right, and there was this cross. And I looked up and to the left, and there were these bells. And there were these 2 benches, and I walked up between the 2 benches. And then this person in white starts walking to me. I can't even make out their face, it's so bright. And this person put their hand on my head, and they wept over me. And their tears touched my head, and they touched my shoulder. And I knew that God knew that I lost everything, and that he still saw me. And for us today, I think this story is helpful in 2 ways, because many of us, most of us, need to imagine ourselves as the nun. That faithful consistency in the community, that prayer, that relationship, that courage to give her entire life to prayer, that critique. I mean, she didn't run away from the bulldozer. She ran towards them to be with this friend. Some of us need to think about the courage and the cost and the critique. Others of us, maybe your restaurant has been plowed to the ground. I don't mean literally, I mean metaphorically here. Your relationships are broken. Your job is in shambles. You have seen everything you built your life around crumble to the ground. And so my invitation to you is, come and let Jesus put his hand on your head and weep over you. Allow him. Allow him to do that. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you sent Jesus, the peacemaker, to be with us, to teach us how to be your children. You've given us this vocation of making peace, all of us. Help us, God, to step into that, whether that's through marriage or through some other situation with a job or a coworker. Or God, I even pray for the discourse in this country right now. Help us as Christians be people of peace. God, also for those people whose restaurants are destroyed, whose lives are in shambles. God, just be tender. Come close. Yeah. In Jesus' name.